On March 14, 1483, papal investigators descended upon the Dominican monastery of Santo Tomás in Avila, Spain, carrying with them a sealed warrant from Rome itself. What they discovered in the monastery's underground chambers would become one of the most disturbing footnotes in Inquisition history. A footnote that the Church would spend centuries trying to erase. In the torture chamber, beneath the vaulted stone ceiling still sticky with blood, they found him. Brother Rodrigo de Mendoza, the monastery's chief inquisitor, sat motionless on a wooden stool. His eyes were vacant, his lips moving in silent prayer. On his shoulder perched a massive raven, its feathers the color of burnt iron, its talons embedded deep into the monk's flesh. The bird turned to face the investigators. In its beak it held a human eye. The eye was still warm, but the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Before we uncover the truth about the Inquisition torture chamber raven, the demonic familiar that allegedly watched over 200 confessions and plucked out the eyes of heretics, make sure to subscribe to the Silent Abbey and ring that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's darkest corners. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers spread across the globe. Now, let's descend into the shadows of 15th century Spain. Spain, 1478. The Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, have just received papal authorization to establish the Spanish Inquisition. The timing is no coincidence. After centuries of Muslim rule in Iberia, the Reconquista is nearly complete. Granada, the last Islamic stronghold, teeters on the edge of collapse. But with military victory comes a new obsession: religious purity. The conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity, number in the hundreds of thousands. Many conversions were genuine, others were performed under the shadow of persecution, secret adherence to Jewish practices hidden behind Christian facades. The monarchy and the church see conspiracy everywhere. They need an instrument of control, of terror, of absolute religious conformity. Enter the Dominican order. The Dominicans have always been the church's theological enforcers, founded in 1216 specifically to combat heresy. Their motto, Veritas, truth. But in 1480s Spain, truth would be extracted with hot iron and the crack of breaking bones. The monastery of Santo Tomás sits on a hill overlooking Avila, a walled city in the mountains of Castile. Construction began in 1482, funded personally by Queen Isabella, who saw the Dominicans as essential to her vision of a purely Catholic Spain. The monastery is magnificent, Gothic arches, elaborate stonework, a library that would eventually house over 3,000 volumes. But beneath this architectural splendor, in chambers carved from living rock, another purpose takes shape. Brother Rodrigo de Mendoza arrives at Santo Tomás in the spring of 1480, 2 years before the monastery's official founding. He comes with recommendations from Tomás de Torquemada himself, the man who would soon become the first Grand Inquisitor of Spain. Rodrigo is 32 years old, a brilliant theologian from a minor noble family in Toledo. Those who knew him describe a man of intense piety, someone who fasted until he collapsed, who wore a hair shirt beneath his robes that left his back a lattice of scars. He also possesses a gift, or so he tells the prior, the ability to see demons. In late medieval Spain, this claim is neither unusual nor dismissed. The world is understood as a battleground between divine and demonic forces. Demons can possess the unwary, tempt the faithful, even take physical form. The Church's official position, codified in the Malleus Maleficarum published just 5 years earlier, is that demons are real, dangerous, and actively seeking to corrupt Christian souls. Brother Rodrigo's point, meant as the monastery's inquisitor, seems inevitable. The role requires someone who can peer into souls, who can distinguish genuine repentance from theatrical performance, who understands the subtle signs of demonic influence. What no one anticipates is that Brother Rodrigo will bring a companion to his work. The raven appears in the autumn of 1480, just as Rodrigo begins conducting his first interrogations in the underground chambers. At first, it's simply there, perched in the window of the torture room, its black eyes watching the proceedings with what witnesses later describe as disturbing intelligence. Rodrigo calls the bird Malachi, after the last book of the Old Testament, the final prophet before 4 centuries of divine silence. The symbolism is clear. Malachi comes at the end of things, at the moment before judgment. By winter, the raven never leaves Rodrigo's side. The first detailed account of Malachi's presence comes from a court scribe named Pedro Alvarez, who recorded interrogations in the Santo Tomás chambers. His testimony, preserved in the archives of the Archdiocese of Avila, describes the questioning of a merchant named Isaac Abravanel, accused of secretly practicing Jewish rites. The accused was brought to the chamber at the hour of none, Alvarez writes. Brother Rodrigo stood before him, and upon his shoulder sat the great black bird called Malachi. I had seen this creature before, but on this day it seemed changed. Its eyes did not blink. Its head moved with each word spoken by the accused as though understanding our Christian tongue. The interrogation follows standard procedure. Rodrigo questions Abravanel about his observance of the Sabbath, his dietary practices, his prayers. Abravanel denies everything, proclaims his sincere conversion to Christianity, invokes the mercy of Christ. For 3 hours this continues. Then, according to Alvarez's account, something shifts. The bird began to cry out, he records, not the common caw of ravens, but a sound most terrible, like a child's scream strangled in the throat. Brother Rodrigo did not react, but continued his questions as though he heard nothing. The accused, however, went pale as death, his eyes fixed upon the bird, and he began to shake most violently. Within minutes, Isaac Abravanel confesses to everything. He admits to lighting Sabbath candles in his cellar, to refusing pork, to maintaining his Jewish faith in secret while presenting a Christian face to the world. His confession is detailed, incriminating, and leads to the arrest of 17 other converso families in Avila. Abravanel is burned at the stake on January 3, 1481. He is the first of many. By early 1481, Malachi's reputation has spread throughout the monastery. The younger monks avoid the bird. They whisper about its unnatural size, some claim it stands nearly 2 feet tall, and the way it seems to appear in unexpected places. Several report seeing it perched outside their cell windows at night, tapping at the glass with its beak. Brother Tomas Fernandez, a novice who maintains the monastery gardens, begins having nightmares. In his dreams, the raven speaks to him in Hebrew, a language he has never studied but somehow understands. The words are always the same. God sees, God knows, confess. Fernandez confides in the prior, Brother Alfonso de Burgos, explaining that he fears demonic influence. The prior is skeptical. Nightmares are common enough among young monks adjusting to monastic life, but he agrees to observe Rodrigo's next interrogation, if only to put the novice's mind at ease. The session involves a woman named Beatriz de Luna, accused of heresy for expressing doubt about transubstantiation. She's a widow, 63 years old, from a respected family. The charges seem thin. Prior Alfonso's account, preserved in a letter to the Bishop of Avila, describes what he witnesses. I attended the interrogation with the intent to assess Brother Rodrigo's methods, which have called severe. The accused woman was elderly and frail, yet she maintained her innocence with admirable composure. Brother Rodrigo questioned her gently at first, almost kindly. The bird sat upon its customary perch near the window. After perhaps an hour, I noticed that the woman's gaze kept drifting to the raven. She would look at it, then quickly away, then back again as though compelled. Brother Rodrigo seemed to notice this as well. He asked her, "Does the bird trouble you, good woman?" She replied, "It is watching me." "Yes," Brother Rodrigo said. "Malachi watches all who come before this tribunal. He watches and he remembers and he knows." The woman began to weep then, Your Grace. She confessed not only to the charges against her, but to secret meetings with other suspected heretics, to possession of banned books, to teaching her grandchildren prayers in Hebrew. She gave us names, 14 in total. All this without the application of any physical duress. Prior Alfonso concludes his letter with a troubling observation. I cannot escape the feeling that the bird itself extracted this confession, though by what means I cannot fathom. I am a man of reason, Your Grace, educated in the natural philosophy of Aristotle. Yet I tell you plainly, there is something unnatural in Santo Tomás. The incident that would eventually draw Rome's attention occurs on August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption. An accused heretic named Diego Martinez has been in the monastery's cells for 2 weeks, refusing to confess despite repeated interrogations. Rodrigo orders the application of the strappado, a torture where the victim is suspended by their bound wrists, which are tied behind their back, causing extreme pain in the shoulders. 3 witnesses are present: Pedro Alvarez the scribe, Father Sebastian Cruz, who serves as theological advisor, and the executioner, a man named simply as Garcia in the records. Alvarez's account is clinical in its detail. The accused was raised by the pulley 3 times, each time being released to fall within inches of the floor, that the shoulder joints might dislocate and cause great anguish. Upon the 3rd raising, he screamed most piteously but offered no confession. Brother Rodrigo approached him and spoke thus, Diego, my son, you suffer needlessly. The truth will make you free. Confess your sins before God in this tribunal. The accused spat at Brother Rodrigo's feet. What happened next, I swear before Christ and all his saints to be true, though I scarce believe it myself. The bird Malachi, which had been perched as always near the window, took flight. It flew directly at the accused man's face. There was a terrible cry, whether from man or bird I cannot say, and when the creature flew back to its perch, it held in its beak the accused man's right eye. Father Cruz's account confirms this, adding chilling details. The eye was removed cleanly, as by a surgeon's hand. The socket bled, but not profusely. The accused fell unconscious from shock. Malachi carried the eye to Brother Rodrigo and dropped it into his palm. Brother Rodrigo looked upon it for a long moment, then spoke words I shall never forget. Even this sacrifice is not enough, Diego. Your soul remains in darkness. When you wake you will confess, or you will lose the second eye, and then the light of God will be forever hidden from you. Your Grace, I am 47 years old. I have served the Holy Inquisition for 12 years. I have witnessed every manner of torture approved by the Church, but never have I seen a creature act with such deliberate malice, such apparent understanding of its role in these proceedings. Diego Martinez regains consciousness 3 hours later. His first words are, I confess. His testimony implicates an entire network of crypto-Jews in Avila and the surrounding region, leading to the largest mass arrest in the early history of the Spanish Inquisition. 63 people taken into custody. Why, over the course of 4 months, Diego himself is executed on October 1, 1481. According to witnesses at the burning, Brother Rodrigo is present with Malachi on his shoulder. The raven watches the flames consume the one-eyed heretic without making a sound. Brother Tomás Fernandez, the young monk who first reported nightmares about the raven, begins to deteriorate mentally. He stops eating, claiming the food is poisoned by demons. He spends hours in the chapel, praying in languages no one recognizes. Other monks report hearing him in conversation with invisible presences. On December 17th, Fernandez attempts to kill Malachi. He enters the torture chamber while Rodrigo is conducting an interrogation, carrying a heavy wooden cross. According to witnesses, he screams, "Demon, I cast you out," and swings the cross at the bird. Malachi takes flight, evading the blow. Fernandez pursues it around the chamber, destroying furniture, overturning the implements of torture. The interrogation subject, a woman accused of sorcery, cowers in the corner, forgotten. Brother Rodrigo does not move. He stands perfectly still, watching Fernandez with an expression that witnesses later describe as sorrowful. Finally, exhausted, Fernandez collapses. Malachi lands on the young monk's chest, its talons gripping the fabric of his robe. It leans forward until its beak is inches from Fernandez's face. What happened next haunts me still, writes Father Cruz, who witnessed the scene. The bird opened its beak, and from its throat came a voice, a human voice, speaking in perfect Castilian Spanish. It said, "You have seen truly, Thomas, but seeing is not enough. You must choose." Brother Tomás began to laugh then, a sound of pure madness. He laughed until blood came from his mouth, until his mind shattered completely. He has not spoken a coherent word since. Fernandez is confined to a cell. He lives for another 8 months, rocking back and forth, drawing symbols on the walls with his own excrement. He dies on August 3, 1482. The official record states natural causes. The unofficial record, preserved in a letter from Prior Alfonso to the bishop, tells a different story. Brother Tomás died with his eyes gone, Your Grace. The sockets were empty, as though the eyes had been surgically removed. Yet his cell was locked from the outside. No one entered. The only mark upon his body were small puncture wounds on his shoulders, the precise size and spacing of a large bird's talons. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button to let us know you're brave enough to continue. Share this with someone who loves dark historical mysteries, but maybe not right before bedtime. Now let's discover what happens when Rome finally takes notice of the demonic familiar in Avila. The papal investigation begins with a letter. Father Sebastian Cruz, the theological advisor who witnessed the eye-plucking incident, has been carrying a burden of conscience for months. In February 1483, he writes to Cardinal Francisco Jiménez de Cisneros in Toledo, describing in careful detail the events at Santo Tomás. He does not accuse Brother Rodrigo of heresy or witchcraft. Such accusations would require ironclad proof. Instead, he frames his concerns as theological questions requiring expert interpretation. Is it possible, Cruz writes, for a servant of God to employ a demonic familiar in the pursuit of holy work? Can evil means be sanctified by righteous ends? I pose these questions not in judgment, but in genuine uncertainty, for what I have witnessed defies the categories of natural philosophy and challenges my understanding of divine providence. Cardinal Cisneros, a Franciscan known for his theological rigor, recognizes the implications immediately. If reports of a demonic familiar are true, it suggests corruption within the Inquisition itself, an institution barely 3 years old, still establishing its legitimacy. More troubling, the monastery in question was Perso, Nally funded by Queen Isabella. Any investigation must be handled with extreme delicacy. Cisneros writes to Rome. His letter reaches Pope Sixtus IV in early March 1483. The Pope, already concerned about reports of Inquisition excesses in Spain, authorizes a secret investigation to be led by 2 papal legates, Bishop Enrico Alberti, an Italian expert in canon law, and Father Miguel de Salamanca, a Spanish Dominican specifically chosen for his knowledge of demonology. The investigators arrive in Avila on March 12, 1483. They carry with them sealed orders from Rome granting them authority to examine all aspects of the monastery's operations, to question any person, to demand access to all records. Prior Alfonso receives them with visible nervousness. The prior attempted to prepare us, Bishop Alberti writes in his report to Rome. He explained that Brother Rodrigo's methods, while unconventional, had proven remarkably effective. In the 2.5 years since Rodrigo began his work, the monastery had processed 213 cases, achieving a confession rate of 94%. The bird is but a tool, Prior Alfonso insisted. Brother Rodrigo has mastered the art of psychological warfare against the enemies of Christ. We asked to observe an interrogation. The prior's face went pale, but he agreed. The interrogation is scheduled for March 14th. The subject is a merchant named Alfonso Perez, accused of selling banned books. Bishop Alberti and Father Miguel position themselves in the chamber's observation alcove, hidden behind an iron screen where they can see without being seen. Brother Rodrigo enters punctually at noon. Malachi sits on his shoulder, exactly as described in Father Cruz's letters. Alberti notes that the bird is indeed unnaturally large, its eyes black and gleaming with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The interrogation begins routinely. Rodrigo questions Perez about his book inventory, his customers, his travels. Perez denies the charges, maintaining that he's a legitimate merchant who deals only in approved religious texts. For the first hour, nothing unusual occurs. Then Malachi begins to move. The bird hopped from Brother Rodrigo's shoulder to the table where the instruments of torture were displayed, Father Miguel's account records. It walked among the implements, the thumbscrews, the Iron Maiden's collar, the heated irons, examining each with what I can only describe as deliberate consideration. Then it selected one. Using its beak, it grasped a small iron spike, perhaps 4 inches long, and flew with it to the accused man. It landed on the arm of his chair within inches of his trembling hands. The accused began to shake. "Please," he whispered, "please, not the eyes. I'll tell you everything. Just not the eyes." And he did. He confessed to trafficking in banned Jewish texts, to maintaining a secret library of Kabbalistic works, to providing these materials to crypto-Jews throughout Castile. He named suppliers, customers, fellow conspirators. The confession was comprehensive, detailed, incriminating, and not once did Brother Rodrigo or any human touch the man. The bird alone had extracted this confession through the power of terror. After the interrogation, Bishop Alberti demands a private meeting with Brother Rodrigo. The conversation takes place in Rodrigo's cell, a sparse room containing only a bed, a wooden desk, and a perch where Malachi sits, watching. Alberti's report preserves the dialogue. I asked him directly, "Brother Rodrigo, what is the nature of this creature?" He replied with perfect calm, "Malachi is a gift from God, your grace, an instrument of divine justice." "Ravens do not speak," I said. "They do not select torture implements. They do not understand human language or the subtleties of interrogation. What you describe, what I have witnessed, suggests something supernatural." "Precisely," Rodrigo said, "supernatural, beyond nature. Just as God is beyond nature, just as miracles are beyond nature, just as the Inquisition's holy work is beyond the common understanding of nature." Or, I suggested, demonic, demons too are beyond nature. He smiled at this, a smile that chilled me to my soul. "Your Grace, how does one distinguish between a divine miracle and a demonic deception? By the fruit it bears. My work with Malachi has brought 200 souls to confession, has rooted out heresy throughout this region, has served the greater glory of God and His Church. Can demons produce such holy fruit? I had no immediate answer. The theological question is indeed complex, but I resolved to examine the chamber more carefully. The next day, March 15th, while Brother Rodrigo conducts morning prayers in the chapel, Bishop Alberti and Father Miguel search the torture chamber. What they discover transforms the investigation from theological inquiry to criminal case. Behind a loose stone in the wall, Alberti's report states, "We found a cavity. Within it, a leather-bound journal written in Brother Rodrigo's hand, 3 small glass vials containing what appeared to be blood, a collection of human teeth. We counted 27, and most disturbing of all, a velvet bag containing 12 human eyes, preserved in what our physician later identified as honey mixed with salt. The journal is the key to everything, written in Latin with occasional passages in Hebrew, which Rodrigo apparently learned in secret. It chronicles his relationship with Malachi from the very beginning. The first entry is dated September 18, 1480. Today I found him in the forest near the monastery. A raven, but not a common bird. When I approached, he did not flee. He looked at me, and I knew with certainty born of the Holy Spirit, that this creature was sent to me for a divine purpose. I have prayed for a sign, for a way to serve God more perfectly in the work of purification. Here is my answer, perched on a branch, waiting." The entries continue, documenting a progressive descent into madness wrapped in religious justification. October 3, 1480. I have begun the rituals. The old woman in the village, the one they whisper is a bruja. She sold me the book. It is in Hebrew, yes, but the Kabbalists were not wrong about everything. They understood that names have power, that will can shape reality, that the distance between heaven and hell is thinner than we imagine. November 12, 1480. The first feeding. He requires blood, not for sustenance but for the bond. My blood freely given. 7 drops upon his beak. 7 words spoken in the old tongue. He is mine now, and I am his. We are instruments of a justice that transcends human law. December 8, 1480. Success. Malachi has spoken. Not in human words, but I understand him. We communicate soul to soul, mind to mind. He shows me the truth hidden in men's hearts. The converso merchant claimed innocence, but Malachi saw the lie written in his very essence. Together we extracted the truth. This is the work I was born to do. The entries grow more disturbing. Rodrigo describes rituals involving the eyes of the confessed, removing them after execution, preserving them, using them in ceremonies he claims strengthen his bond with Malachi. He writes of teaching the bird to recognize lies, to sense fear, to understand the subtle tells that indicate deception. Most chillingly, he documents the creation of a persona. The ignorant believe Malachi acts of his own volition, that he is a demon or a divine messenger. Let them believe. Fear is a tool more powerful than any hot iron. I have trained him to perform on cue, to respond to signals invisible to observers, to create the illusion of supernatural intelligence. But the truth is both simpler and more profound. Malachi is an extension of my will, shaped by ancient knowledge, bound by blood ritual, perfected through practice. Together, we serve a higher purpose. The final entry, dated Mar. They are coming. One day before the papal investigators arrive, reads, "They are coming. I know this as Malachi knows the approach of carrion. The weak-minded fools who question our methods, who cannot see that the work itself justifies any means. But they will not understand. They will call me heretic, demon worshipper, madman. They will burn me as I have burned so many. So be it. I regret nothing. 200 confessions, 200 souls saved from eternal damnation through our work. If I must suffer for this service, I suffer gladly. But Malachi must survive. The work must continue. Someone else will find him, will learn his ways, will take up the burden I must lay down. The bird is immortal. The work is eternal. Truth will out, always and forever, by whatever means necessary." Bishop Alberti finishes reading the journal at sunset on March 15th. He immediately orders Brother Rodrigo's arrest and confinement. Guards are dispatched to take him into custody. They find him in the torture chamber, sitting on his wooden stool, Malachi on his shoulder. His eyes are vacant, his lips moving in silent prayer. He offers no resistance as they bind his hands. But when they try to remove Malachi, the bird refuses to leave. It digs its talons deeper into Rodrigo's flesh, drawing blood. One guard attempts to knock it away with a club. The bird dodges, takes flight, circles the chamber. Then it dives at the guard's face. The guard screams, drops his weapon, covers his eyes with his hands. The bird doesn't strike. Instead, it returns to Rodrigo's shoulder, blood on its beak. The blood is not the guard's. It's Rodrigo's own, drawn from wounds the bird has inflicted on his master's flesh. Leave the bird, Bishop Alberti orders. Bring them both. We will deal with the creature later. As they lead Brother Rodrigo from the chamber, he speaks for the first time, his voice hollow, distant. You cannot kill what was never truly alive. You cannot end what is eternal. Malachi will endure. The truth will endure. And someone, someday, will continue the work we began. It's March 14th, 1483. The discovery is complete. But the horror is far from over. The investigation into Brother Rodrigo de Mendoza and his demonic familiar expands rapidly, uncovering layers of corruption, occult practice, and institutional complicity that shake the foundations of the early Spanish Inquisition. Brother Rodrigo is confined to a cell in the monastery while Bishop Alberti and Father Miguel conduct their investigation. He refuses to eat, refuses to speak beyond repeating passages from Scripture. Malachi remains with him, perched on the cell's single window ledge, refusing all attempts at removal. On March 20th, a delegation of local Inquisition officials arrives from Toledo, led by Tomás de Torquemada himself, the man who recommended Rodrigo for his position. Torquemada is furious at the papal intrusion, seeing it as a challenge to Spanish sovereignty and the Inquisition's independence. There was a tense confrontation, Bishop Alberti reports to Rome. Torquemada argued that Brother Rodrigo's methods, while unorthodox, produced results that served the faith. He claimed that my investigation undermined the Inquisition's authority and would embolden heretics throughout Spain. I responded that serving the faith through demonic means was itself heresy of the highest order. Torquemada demanded to see the evidence. I showed him the journal, the preserved eyes, the documentation of Rodrigo's blood rituals and Kabbalistic practices. His face went ashen. Whatever he expected, it was not this. He withdrew without another word. The political implications are enormous. Queen Isabella has personally funded Santo Tomás. The Dominican order's reputation is at stake. The Spanish Inquisition, barely established, faces potential discreditation before it can fully assert its authority. Cardinal Cisneros arrives in Avila on April 2nd to mediate between the papal investigators and Spanish church officials. He proposes a compromise. The investigation will continue, but its findings will be sealed and shared only with the highest levels of the church. Public scandal will be avoided. The Inquisition's legitimacy will be protected. Bishop Alberti reluctantly agrees, provided that Brother Rodrigo faces full canonical prosecution. The ecclesiastical trial of Brother Rodrigo de Mendoza begins on May 15, 1483, in a closed session at the Cathedral of Avila. No public observers are permitted. The tribunal consists of 3 judges, Bishop Alberti, Cardinal Cisneros, and Bishop Juan Arias Davila of Segovia, known for his expertise in heresy cases. The prosecution presents overwhelming evidence: the journal documenting blood rituals and Kabbalistic practices, the preserved eyes, testimony from Father Cruz and other witnesses, and the physical evidence of torture implements arranged by the Raven, under what can only be interpreted as demonic instruction. Rodrigo's defense is conducted by Father Luis de Leon, a Dominican lawyer who argues on several points. First, he claims that Rodrigo's mental state should be considered. This is not a heretic, de Leon argues, but a zealot driven mad by the intensity of his devotion. He genuinely believes still, that his methods serve God. This is not malicious heresy but tragic delusion. Second, he points to the confession rate. 213 cases, 201 confessions, a success rate that no other inquisitor in Spain can match. If these confessions were extracted through demonic means, would they not be false? Yet investigations have confirmed the accuracy of the information obtained. Real heretical networks were dismantled. Real threats to the faith were eliminated. Third, he challenges the interpretation of the journal. Brother Rodrigo admits to studying forbidden texts, yes, but studying is not practicing. He sought to understand the enemy's methods the better to combat them. His rituals were theater, psychological manipulation designed to enhance the bird's intimidating presence. There is no evidence of actual demonic contact, only of a troubled man using extreme methods in service of holy goals. The prosecution's counter-argument is devastating. Father Miguel de Salamanca, the demonology expert, testifies for 3 days, systematically dismantling the defense. The journal describes specific Kabbalistic binding rituals, Miguel explains. These are not merely read about, they are performed, documented, refined. The blood offering is a classic element of demonic pact-making. The preservation of eyes in honey and salt corresponds to necromantic practices forbidden by the Church since the Council of Laodicea. Moreover, multiple witnesses testify that the raven spoke in human language. This is not natural behavior that can be explained by training. Ravens can mimic simple sounds, yes, but not hold coherent conversation, not respond contextually to interrogations, not demonstrate understanding of theological concepts. The defense claims Brother Rodrigo's methods were theater, but theater does not result in actual supernatural phenomena. Theater does not cause a bird to surgically remove a human eye. Theater does not allow interspecies communication. What occurred at Santo Tomás was not performance, it was genuine diabolism dressed in the garments of holy purpose. The trial's most dramatic moment comes when Rodrigo himself finally speaks. On June 3, 1483, he requests permission to address the tribunal directly. Permission is granted. His statement lasts 47 minutes. Contemporary accounts describe a man transformed, no longer the vacant-eyed prisoner of previous weeks, but fierce, articulate, absolutely convinced of his righteousness. You ask if I practiced dark arts, he tells the judges. I ask you, what is darkness? Is it not merely the absence of light? And what is light but truth revealed? I sought truth. I found it in places, You fear to look. In knowledge you condemn because it challenges your comfortable certainties. The Kabbalists understood something the Church has forgotten, that God's creation is vast and strange, that the boundaries between heaven and earth are permeable, that will and faith can accomplish what seems impossible to the timid and the orthodox. Malachi is not a demon. He is a tool no different from the rack or the thumbscrew, except that he is alive, he learns. He becomes more perfect in his purpose. Through him I achieved what no other inquisitor could achieve, the extraction of truth without the need for extensive physical torture. My subjects confessed faster, with less suffering, with greater accuracy. You say I used blood ritual. I say I used sacred covenant. Blood is the currency of the divine. It is the blood of Christ that redeems, the blood of martyrs that sanctifies, the blood of sacrifice that pleases God from the days of Abel. My blood, freely given, bound me to an instrument of God's justice. The preserved eyes? They are relics no different from the finger bones of saints kept in your reliquaries. Each eye belonged to a confessed heretic. Each represented a soul brought to truth. I kept them as reminders of the work, as meditation tools, as proof of service rendered. You will condemn me, I know this. You will call me heretic, will strip my habit, will perhaps even burn me. But know this, in 213 cases I never failed. 200 souls were saved. How many can you claim? How many heretics slip through your fingers because you lack the courage, the will, the knowledge to do what must be done? Malachi and I served God perfectly. History will judge whether you serve him as well. The tribunal deliberates for 3 weeks. The verdict, delivered on June 24, 1483, finds Brother Rodrigo guilty on multiple counts. 1. Practicing forbidden Kabbalistic rituals. Engaging in blood magic prohibited by canon law. 3. Consorting with a familiar spirit. 4. Perverting the sacred work of the Inquisition through demonic means. 5. Causing scandal to the faith through heretical practices. He is sentenced to life imprisonment in a monastery prison, with no possibility of parole or communication with the outside world. He is stripped of his Dominican habit and forbidden from ever again practicing any religious office. Crucially, the tribunal stops short of declaring him a formal heretic warranting execution. Cardinal Cisneros successfully argues that Rodrigo's obvious mental deterioration makes him more pitiable than dangerous, and that burning him would create a martyr figure that crypto-heretics might rally around. The sentence is political compromise wrapped in theological language. With Rodrigo condemned, the tribunal must address the more difficult question, what to do with the raven. The bird has remained in Rodrigo's cell throughout the trial, accepting food from no one, attacking any person who enters except Rodrigo himself. Multiple attempts to capture or kill it have failed. When guards enter with nets, it evades capture with uncanny intelligence. When they try to poison its food, it refuses to eat. When an archer is sent to shoot it through the cell window, the arrow misses. Witnesses claim the bird moved before the archer released, as though anticipating the shot. Father Miguel proposes an exorcism. On July 3, 1483, he conducts the Rituale Romanum exorcism ceremony in Rodrigo's cell, commanding any demonic entity to depart in the name of Christ. The bird sits on its perch, utterly unmoved. It does not react to holy water, to sacred oil, to the recitation of scripture, to the display of consecrated hosts. At the ceremony's conclusion, it simply cocks its head and, according to multiple witnesses, makes a sound distinctly like human laughter. The exorcism failed completely, Miguel reports. Either the creature is not demonic in nature, or it is bound by powers beyond the Church's formulaic rituals. I am forced to conclude the latter is more likely. Bishop Alberti suggests a more direct approach. starvation. If the bird will not eat, let it waste away naturally. Rodrigo is removed from the cell, placed in solitary confinement elsewhere in the monastery. The cell is locked and sealed. For 2 weeks, observers watch the cell through a small viewing slot. Malachi does not eat, does not drink, does not appear to weaken. It simply sits on its perch, occasionally preening its feathers, showing no signs of distress. On July 18th, observers notice something disturbing. Small animals, mice, rats, a stray cat, are found dead in the cell, their bodies drained of blood, their eyes missing. The cell has been completely sealed. There is no way for these animals to have entered naturally. The conclusion is inescapable, Alberti writes. The creature is sustaining itself through supernatural means, perhaps drawing nourishment from the suffering and death it helped cause, or from some darker source beyond our understanding. A decision is made, the cell will be sealed permanently. Malachi will be entombed alive, left to whatever fate awaits it in that stone prison. On July 20th, 1483, masons arrive to wall up the cell entrance. As they work, the bird begins to scream, the same childlike scream that so terrified Isaac Abravanel in the first interrogation. It continues for 3 hours, until the final stone is laid and the wall is complete. The screaming stops. An oppressive silence fills the monastery. That night, every monk in Santo Tomás reports the same nightmare, a raven with human eyes, speaking in the voice of someone they loved and lost, begging to be released. Rodrigo is transferred to a monastery prison in the mountains of Leon, far from Avila. The conditions are harsh but not cruel. A small cell, basic food, no human contact except for the guard who delivers meals through a slot in the door. At first, he rages against his confinement, demanding to be heard, insisting his work was holy. The guards report hearing him shouting at night, carrying on conversations with an invisible companion, laughing at jokes no one else can hear. By 1485, he falls silent. The guards occasionally glimpse him through the viewing slot, sitting motionless on his bed, staring at the wall. Sometimes his lips move in silent prayer or conversation. In 1488, a new guard named Martin de Soria is assigned to the prison. Martin is young, curious, somewhat sympathetic to the old prisoner. Against regulations, he sometimes speaks to Rodrigo through the door, asking about his past, his crimes, his regrets. Rodrigo rarely responds. But on one occasion, August 15th, 1488, exactly 7 years after the eye-plucking incident, he speaks at length. Martin records the conversation in a personal journal that survives in the archives of Leon. I asked him if he regretted his actions. He laughed, a dry, brittle sound like breaking twigs. Regret, he said. I regret only that I failed, that I allowed fear and doubt to poison my perfect work, that I did not go far enough. I asked what he meant by far enough. Malachi was only the beginning, he said. An experiment, a proof of concept. Imagine an entire network of such creatures, each bound to an inquisitor, each perfecting the extraction of truth. Imagine heresy rooted out with absolute efficiency, confession rates approaching 100%. Imagine a church purified by perfect knowledge, by the elimination of every hidden sin, every secret doubt. That was my vision. A church of absolute truth, enforced by instruments that could not be deceived, could not be corrupted, could not fail. But I was stopped by small men with small minds, by those who feared knowledge, who preferred comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable perfection. Malachi endures, I know this. I feel his presence even here, even through these walls, even across these mountains. He waits. And someday someone will break the seal. Someone will find H. Someone will continue the work. I told him the cell was sealed, that the bird must be dead after years of confinement. He laughed again. Death is for creatures of flesh and blood alone. Malachi is something else now, something transformed by our bond, by the rituals, by the years of service to truth. He does not age. He does not hunger as mortal things hunger. He simply is and will be, world without end. Brother Rodrigo de Mendoza dies on March 14, 1491. Exactly 8 years to the day after the papal investigators discovered his crimes. The official record states natural causes, though he was only 43 years old. The guard finds him seated upright on his bed, eyes closed, a slight smile on his face. On his pillow, the guard finds a single black feather. The guard reports this to his superior, who orders the feather destroyed. But before it can be burned, it disappears. No one admits to taking it. A search of the cell reveals nothing. The incident is noted in the prison's log, then forgotten. For 23 years, the sealed cell at Santo Tomás remains undisturbed. It becomes a cautionary tale among the monks, a reminder of the dangers of zealotry and forbidden knowledge. Novices are told fragments of the story, enough to inspire fear, not enough to inspire curiosity. Then, in 1506, the monastery undergoes renovations. The old torture chambers are to be converted into storage rooms for the library. Masons are brought in to assess the structure, to determine what walls can be removed or modified. One of these masons, a man named Juan Hidalgo, discovers the sealed cell. His initial report notes that the wall appears newer than the surrounding structure, that the stonework is different. He recommends removing it to create more space. Prior Sebastian de Toledo, who became prior in 1498 and knows nothing of the cell's history, approves the demolition. The monastery's records from the 1480s are incomplete. Much was deliberately destroyed or lost during a reorganization in the 1490s. On September 18, 1506, exactly 26 years to the day since Rodrigo first found Malachi in the forest, masons break through the wall. The cell beyond is empty. No raven, no bones, no sign that any living thing had been imprisoned there for over 2 decades. But on the stone perch where Malachi once sat, the masons find something, a message, scratched into the rock as if by a sharp beak, written in Latin, Veritas vincit omnia. I wait for the worthy. Truth conquers all. I wait for the worthy. News of the message reaches Prior Sebastian, who orders an immediate investigation into the cell's history. Archives are searched. Old monks are questioned. Finally, Father Luis Ramirez, who arrived at Santo Tomás in 1479 and is now in his 60s, remembers. He tells the prior everything, Rodrigo, Malachi, the confessions, the trial, the sealing. Prior Sebastian orders the cell sealed again immediately, but it's too late. 3 days after the unsealing, Juan Hidalgo, the mason who first broke through the wall, brings a visitor to the monastery. A young Dominican monk named Tomás de Seville, who claims to have received a vision calling him to Avila, to Santo Tomás, to a sacred purpose waiting to be fulfilled. Tomás is 28 years old. He is brilliant, charismatic, deeply devoted to the cause of religious purity. He reminds the older monks uncomfortably of Brother Rodrigo at the same age. Prior Sebastian refuses Tomás's request to stay at the monastery. He senses danger, though he cannot articulate exactly what troubles him about this earnest young monk. Tomás leaves peacefully, but 3 months later, reports reach Avila from Salamanca. A young inquisitor named Tomás has appeared there, conducting interrogations with remarkable success. He works with unusual methods, eschewing extensive physical torture in favor of psychological techniques. He is always accompanied by a large black raven. The cycle, it seems, has begun again. News O. Tomás de Seville and his raven reaches Rome in 1507. Pope Julius II, preoccupied with Italian politics and military campaigns, nevertheless authorizes a discreet investigation. The investigation proceeds slowly. Tomás moves frequently, Salamanca, Toledo, Cordoba, Seville, always staying ahead of official scrutiny. His confession rates are extraordinary. His methods raise questions, but he produces results. Local Inquisition officials protect him, just as they once protected Rodrigo. By 1512, Tomás has vanished entirely. Some reports claim he died of plague in Seville. Others say he was assassinated by crypto-Jews seeking revenge. Still others suggest he simply disappeared, walking into the mountains with his raven, never to be seen again. The truth remains unknown. What is documented is this: between 1506 and 1515, at least 4 other inquisitors are reported to work with trained ravens. The birds become something of a trend among younger, more aggressive inquisitors, a psychological tool, a symbol of authority, a source of fear. In 1516, the Holy Office issues a formal decree concerning the use of birds in inquisitorial proceedings. The decree forbids any inquisitor from employing ravens, crows, or other corvids as instruments of interrogation. The practice is declared unseemly and suggestive of diabolical influence. Most inquisitors comply. The practice fades, but reports continue, sporadically across the centuries. A whispered legend among Inquisition officials, somewhere passed from hand to hand, inquisitor to inquisitor. Brother Rodrigo's journal still circulates. Those who read it learn the rituals. Those who perform the rituals find their own Malachi, or perhaps find the Malachi, the original, the eternal, the one who waits for the worthy. The last documented report comes from 1818, during the final years of the Spanish Inquisition. An inquisitor in Madrid named Father Vicente Ruiz is found dead in his chambers, both eyes missing. On his desk, a leather-bound journal in Latin describing blood rituals and Kabbalistic binding techniques. Perched on his windowsill, a raven that witnesses claim was impossibly large, with eyes that gleamed with human intelligence. The bird flies away before it can be captured. The journal is burned. But legends, like certain birds, have a way of enduring. The case of Brother Rodrigo and the Inquisition raven resonates far beyond a single disturbed monk and is unusual familiar. It illuminates fundamental questions about power, truth, ends and means, and the corruption that can occur when righteous certainty meets unchecked authority. Brother Rodrigo embodied a particular type of dangerous believer, one absolutely convinced of his righteousness, willing to employ any means to achieve his ends, capable of transforming cruelty into holy service. Modern psychological analysis suggests he likely suffered from what we might now call religious scrupulosity, combined with obsessive-compulsive tendencies and possibly schizotypal personality disorder. His extreme fasting, his hair shirt, his visions of demons, all suggest a man whose religious devotion had crossed into pathology. Yet the Spanish Inquisition, like many authoritarian institutions, did not screen for such pathology. Instead, it rewarded it. Rodrigo's intensity, his uncompromising zeal, his willingness to go further than others, these were seen as virtues, not warning signs. The Inquisition created an environment where moral guardrails were removed, where the end religious purity justified any means torture, terror, psychological warfare, where success was measured in confessions extracted rather than justice served. Rodrigo simply took the logic of the system to its natural conclusion. One of the most disturbing aspects of Rodrigo's story is the progression of his relationship with Malachi. Initially, the bird was a tool, trained, controlled, directed toward specific purposes. But as Rodrigo's journal documents, the relations evolved into something more complex. Whether through genuine supernatural means or through Rodrigo's psychological deterioration, Malachi became less servant and more partner, less instrument and more presence. The line between Rodrigo directing the bird and the bird directing Rodrigo grew increasingly blurred. This dynamic reflects a broader pattern seen throughout history. Instruments of control tend to control their wielders. The torturer becomes shaped by his instruments. The spy becomes paranoid. The censor becomes obsessed with the forbidden material he's meant to suppress. Rodrigo set out to use fear as a weapon. He ended as fear's prisoner, unable to imagine work or purpose or meaning outside the chamber, where confessions were extracted and eyes were taken. The Spanish Inquisition's response to the Rodrigo case reveals the moral compromise inherent in institutions that prioritize self-preservation over principle. The evidence against Rodrigo was overwhelming: blood rituals, Kabbalistic practices, evidence of demonic pact-making. By the Inquisition's own standards, he should have been burned as a heretic. Yet he received life imprisonment instead, and the case was sealed, hidden, suppressed. Why? Because acknowledging the full scope of his crimes would have damaged the Inquisition's credibility. How could an institution claiming divine authority to root out heresy explain that one of its own inquisitors was practicing diabolism? How could it maintain public confidence if its methods were revealed to include not just approved torture techniques, but actual demon summoning? The compromise was institutional self-preservation masquerading as mercy. Rodrigo lived, but the truth was buried. Future generations of inquisitors received no warning, no training on how to recognize the signs of occult corruption, no clear boundaries beyond which even the pursuit of confessions must not go. The result, the cycle repeated, from Tomás de Seville to the unnamed inquisitors of later centuries, each finding their own Malachi, each pushing the boundaries a little further. Modern legal systems recognize that confessions extracted through torture are inherently unreliable. Fear, pain, and psychological manipulation produce whatever response the torturer wants, not necessarily the truth. Yet Rodrigo's defenders, both in 1483 and in the modern analysis of the case, pointed to his extraordinary success rate and the accuracy of confessions obtained. Investigations confirmed that his subjects' confessions led to real heretical networks, to genuine evidence of crypto-Jewish practices, to actual violations of religious law. How do we reconcile this? The answer is disturbing. Some confessions were likely true. The trauma of Rodrigo's methods, the psychological terror of Malachi, the threat of eye removal, the oppressive atmosphere of the chamber, broke people completely. Some confessed to genuine crimes because they could not maintain the psychological fortress necessary to resist. But others, almost certainly, confessed to anything and everything just to make it stop. They implicated neighbors out of confused desperation. They invented details to satisfy their interrogator. They shaped their confessions to match what they thought Rodrigo wanted to hear. The success of Rodrigo's methods is the success of trauma-producing compliance, not truth-producing confession. That some confessions happen to be accurate doesn't validate the method. It merely proves that terror applied with enough force will eventually extract both truth and lies, leaving investigators to sort truth from fiction afterward. The Rodrigo case highlights a fascinating paradox. Inquisitors hunting for witchcraft and demonic practice were themselves sometimes the practitioners. This wasn't unique to Rodrigo. Inquisition records contain multiple cases of inquisitors accused of the very crimes they investigated. The reason is both psychological and practical. To hunt demons, one must study demons. To recognize occult practices, one must understand occult knowledge. The line between studying forbidden arts for defensive purposes and practicing them for power is perilously thin. Rodrigo crossed that line. His journal makes clear that he initially studied Kabbalistic texts to better understand the enemy. But study became practice, knowledge became application, and the instrument of purification became the practitioner of forbidden arts. The irony is exquisite. The Inquisition designed to eliminate occult practice created environments where such practice could flourish, hidden behind the shield of religious authority. The story of Brother Rodrigo and Malachi was actively suppressed by the Spanish Inquisition and the Dominican Order. References in official records are sparse, coded, often deliberately misleading. The full records of his trial remain sealed in Vatican archives to this day. Why does this case remain obscure when we have extensive documentation of other Inquisition abuses? Because institutions control historical memory, and institutions prefer narratives that support their legitimacy. The Inquisition could acknowledge that some inquisitors were overzealous, that torture sometimes went too far, that mistakes were made in the pursuit of faith. These admissions, while embarrassing, fit within a narrative of human imperfection in service of divine purpose. But Rodrigo's case suggests something darker, that the Inquisition's methods were not merely excessive but fundamentally corrupt, that the pursuit of confession became an end in itself detached from justice or truth, that the institution attracted and empowered individuals whose religious devotion masked psychological pathology. This narrative threatens not just the Inquisition's historical reputation, but the broader claim of institutional religious authority. It suggests that zeal without accountability produces monsters, that certainty without humility breeds cruelty, that power without transparency enables evil even, especially, when wrapped in sacred language. We might imagine that Rodrigo's methods died with the Inquisition. We would be wrong. Modern interrogation techniques developed by intelligence agencies bear uncomfortable similarities: psychological manipulation, exploitation of phobias, creation of learned helplessness, the use of seemingly supernatural knowledge obtained through surveillance to break resistance. The theater of confession has moved from torchlit chambers to sterile interrogation rooms, but the fundamental dynamic remains: extract compliance through fear, justify any means by the urgency of the threat, measure success in confessions obtained rather than truth discovered. Rodrigo's Raven has been replaced by new instruments, polygraphs that don't actually detect lies reliably but terrify subjects into confessing, enhanced interrogation techniques that skirt the definition of torture while achieving its effects, artificial intelligence systems that seem to know impossible things about suspects, and thus create the same psychological surrender that Malachi once produced. The specific methods evolve. The underlying logic, that fear is the path to truth, that breaking a person reveals their authentic self, that confessions extracted under duress serve a higher purpose, endures. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Rodrigo case is the question it refuses to answer: was Malachi natural or supernatural? The rationalist interpretation: Rodrigo trained a clever bird, used sleight of hand and psychological manipulation to create an illusion of supernatural intelligence, and gradually convinced himself that his theatrical methods were genuine demonic practice. His journal represents progressive mental illness, not actual occultism. The bird was just a bird. The supernatural interpretation: Rodrigo successfully bound a demonic entity or familiar spirit through Kabbalistic rituals, creating a genuine supernatural servant that outlie ved its master and continues to seek new willing collaborators. The bird is something far more than a bird. The evidence supports both readings. Witnesses describe genuinely inexplicable phenomena. But witnesses in high-stress situations, primed to expect the supernatural, are notoriously unreliable. The sealed cell was found empty, but 23 years is a long time. Perhaps the bird escaped through some overlooked gap, or died and its remains were removed by rats. The truth may be somewhere in between. Rodrigo began with a trained bird and natural techniques, but his rituals and obsession created something genuinely uncanny, not through literal demon summoning, but through the transformation of a living creature into a symbolic presence so freighted with fear and meaning that it transcended its physical nature. Or perhaps the question itself is wrong. Perhaps what matters is not what Malachi was, but what it represented. The human capacity to transform the pursuit of truth into an instrument of terror, to mistake confession for justice, to serve righteousness through unrighteous means. The bird, whether demon or raven or something in between, was ultimately just a mirror reflecting back the darkness in the hearts of those who claimed to serve the light. What do you think drove Brother Rodrigo to such acts? Was he a madman who convinced himself that cruelty was holy? A genuine occultist who successfully summoned a demonic familiar? Or something more complex? A true believer whose devotion to absolute truth led him into absolute corruption? And what about Malachi? Just a trained bird exploited by a disturbed mind? Or something genuinely supernatural that endures still, waiting in some sealed chamber or dark forest for the next inquisitor, the next zealot, the next person willing to sacrifice their humanity in pursuit of perfect truth? Leave your theories in the comments below. The Silent Abbey community always has fascinating perspectives on these dark chapters of history. If this journey into the shadows of the Spanish Inquisition captivated you, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss our deep dives into history's most disturbing mysteries. Hit that notification bell and share this with anyone who loves dark historical tales. Remember, the past is never truly past. The methods change, the costumes evolve, but the fundamental human capacity for transforming righteousness into horror endures across centuries. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking truth, but never forget that how we pursue truth matters as much as what we find. See you in the next video.